Hi, this is Marge Beeler with RareAgent, and we're continuing our mentor blog series. And today our guest is Diorio with DataZ. So welcome.
Thank Marge. Happy to be here.
Good. Great. What I'd like you to do is take about 5 minutes and explain how did you get to where you are today in your career?
Sure. So first, the old adage of luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. It's true. So I started out as a software engineer, and I did that from the mid '80s into the mid '90s. And I was lucky enough that one of my first mentors, while I was in college, I got to work as the first software engineer for a startup company that did offline computer backups onto big platters. And we had a facility in Iron Mountain, New York, where you had to hunch down in this 5 foot tall little cubicle where we had all our storage. And it was I had been working on, as an engineer, I had been working on what's called the cron module. And this is back in the DOS. This is before 386s, the 286 chip. And I wrote the first little program that would wake up and do something. It was called the cron module. And I met this gentleman who had a startup company, and I became their first programmer. Company went and sold for millions of dollars. Mark was my first mentor. I was a college kid. And I think back, he was only 25. And I was much younger than that. So so I started early. Even before that, I was writing games for Atari when I was like 16. So I really got in early on the computer revolution in the late 70s. Had an option, probably biggest decision of my life. Parents said, car or computer, and I took the computer. Later they got me a car because they're like, please drive yourself, get off the computer. But so I went from software engineer, I moved to Silicon Valley. I went from software engineer to becoming a recruiter. I did that for quite a while. I became a top recruiter, well known across the country in doing recruiting for computational modeling. And it's a niche. So I learned something there about niche marketing, niche expertise. After that, I moved back to Wisconsin with my girlfriend, now wife, with 4 kids. And I opened my own recruiting firm, grew it to a couple million. At the 2001, after 9/11, recruiting tanked. That's when I founded Broadlook Technologies. Grew Broadlook for about 14 years. We then merged with Ringlead. I became the interim CEO for the 2 companies for a period. And now it's being run by some real executives. It's exciting to have Chris Hickey, who is the former leader of sales and marketing at Computer Associates, and Russ Arts, who is one of the founders of Computer Associates, the first billion-dollar software company. He's running the company that was part of what I started. So that's exciting. And speaking of mentor, he's a great example of I've got someone to call who grew a billion-dollar company on as needed. So that's kind of cool. Today, I run DataZ, which is a data consultancy company, and we work with everything from bringing the need and the ability together, as well as consulting and best practices. Of course, that's how we're working together now. So long road to get here, but I went from engineer to recruiter to entrepreneur to consultant, and it's been a bumpy and fun ride.
So based on that, I want to ask you, if you were to take let's say $100 million company,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's the sales team or the development team, it can be either side, and they come and ask you to mentor them, what 3 key points would you drive home for them?
Well, I'll select something from somebody we both know, my friend and one of my mentors along the way, Dan Hughes. And Dan was my co-founder at Broadlook. And he'd always drill in, be brilliant at the basics. So, what is at the base of what you're doing? When I consult and look at the problems of sales and marketing, of data, operations, and when I see a problem, I would say, you know, what's one level below? So if the reporting isn't working, I'm like, well, let's look at your data. If your data isn't working, what tools and technologies are you using? If the tools and technologies aren't working, what are your goals and business processes? So I always break things down into a hierarchy. What is dependent on what, and then you drill down to see where do you not have a firm base. It's a very simple process, you know. And I get sometimes like, we couldn't figure it out. It's brilliant, and it's not. It's just it's a process that I've adopted over the years, usually around data, but it works in operations, it works in sales, it works in development, of looking at what you're doing and what it's based on. So I would start breaking things down, documenting, and you can't come in and tell somebody what to do. You can come in and collaborate and extract out of them where they want to go, drop a couple of, oh, I've made a mistake here, don't do that type situations. But it's a very collaborative process.
And how about keeping the mentor or the mentee accountable? So have you found it where you've been mentoring someone and they're not being accountable to you? How do you handle that?
Well, I'm going to go back to when I first founded Broadlook. Somebody, you know, I don't know who it was. They're like, Donato, you need a coach. You're not accountable to anybody. It's like, you know, you told me about this. Did you do that yet? I'm like, no, I didn't. And, you know, some people are, you got the 1 in a million who is just driven so hard, nothing else matters. Personal life tends to drop away, right? We've all known great examples in business history of that. You know, I am a family guy, 4 kids. So what happened was, and my coach was Mark Linwall, so shout out to him. He was at the time with a company called the Action Coach. And, you know, he held me accountable to my own goals. He didn't tell me what to do. He said, he drew out of me, what do I want to accomplish? We brainstormed on the step 1, step 2, step 3. And when I met with him every week, I was accountable. I would get that stare at the 5:30 a.m. breakfast that we would always meet at. And it's like, Donato, you didn't do it. And it added a definite degree of discipline in planning the start of every day. I go through, I plan, what do I have to do? As you know, whenever you reach me, I'm in the gym. It's like 9 a.m. It's like, well, because I worked from 6 to 8. I got things moving along. So I've got my action in place. I learned that from Mark, and it was my idea. He said, that works for you. Run with that, stick with that, have that discipline.
So I'm laughing at your discipline. One of the things I tell everybody when I've done the mentoring is I said, you have to have fun. And if you own a company, you can make your own hours usually. So my thing is every Monday I take a tennis lesson, and that kind of regroups and gets me out of business. That's just something I do. It's fun. Looking back at your career, can you pick out 2 or 3 people? You've already mentioned one. Actually, you've mentioned 2. How have they helped you? Like when you were looking at growing Broadlook and then you sold Broadlook, how did that mentoring help you through that process?
So, you know, there's good mentors, right? And then there's, I don't know if you call it a mentor, but there's also bad examples of, oh my goodness, I don't want to be like that. You know, and we've all had those people to work with. And that's also a mentoring opportunity. So when you work with someone or have the opportunity to work with someone that's really just absolutely toxic, and you figure out how to do that, so I'm gonna throw that out as like a odd sort of mentor, right? And interestingly enough, I had a relationship like that come full circle where we became really good friends, and we realized we were both so absolutely focused on a certain goal. We kind of realized, wow, we're trying to head in the same direction. Maybe we're not listening. I ended up learning a lot in that situation. So you know, Dan, definitely, Mark, who is my business coach, and you know, I've learned from subordinates as well. You know, I've had an opportunity where I've had a brilliant software engineer. I actually had, since I did recruit for software engineers for a long time, the people I had at Broadlook were absolute top 1%ers. So I really got to be a better engineer in working with these guys. So shout outs to both Igor, who's now one of the chief people at Ringlead and Development. I learned a lot from Igor, and Kevin, who is they were my first two engineers at Broadlook. They went at it, and I had to negotiate two brilliant minds. But I learned a lot in that process. Back, even though I had already run teams of hundreds of people out in the valley, I learned from these two engineers because I worked so closely with them. So mentoring can come many places, I guess.
So let's talk a little bit about, we all know, for the most part, we know what drives us and what some of our strengths and weaknesses are. Have you taken the assessment? I imagine you have, because you had the coach, the CEO coach. And what did you find, something that you were like, whoa, I didn't know that about myself, or I thought that was a strength and it ended up becoming a blocking point or a weakness for you?
So I remember we had this gentleman, Russ, come in, and he did what was it, that EMTJ? I can't remember the name of the test. Yeah. So I am, and we'll be like, no, I'm an introvert. If given the choice, I'll go and sit with my book and be home. The fact that I became the CEO of a startup company that was growing rapidly, lots of people, it forced me into doing a lot of trade shows and interviews and things like that. And lo and behold, I got some kudos. Like, boy, we like your speaking, Donato. Can you come back? So that surprised me, but not my wife, who is a psychologist. So she's like, oh yeah, nailed you. So, and I think the whole thing was that it's how you recharge. To me, I want to recharge, which is important, alone. I want to be, I'll have that maybe half day a week that, dad goes out for a bike ride, or I read a book, but I need that recharge time. Conversely, I enjoy working in a team environment. So it's great to bounce the ideas off people.
That's great. I was laughing with Jill Conrath, was one of the interviews, and she was saying, I find that I need change, constant change, and if I don't have it, I get bored, and then I cause problems. So she laughed, and she said, every 7 years I like to change my career. She said, I've been in the same career 15 years now, but every 7 years is normally what I do. So I know there's a change coming up for her. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen there. What do you think about for individuals who, let's say their company won't do the training, they invest in themselves? How important do you think that is?
It's critical. It's one of those things. You got to spend money to make money, and if you're not reading every day, I do. I start out. It's great. I start out with a TED Talk every day. I just hit one. If there's something on my mind, when you're starting a new company like I am, and you're just starting to get the upswing, you got to stay disciplined. So I'm listening to things on discipline and stories and it's like you hear about somebody that did something just amazing, and you're like, oh, I've got no problems. They did this. So I think that's a, I don't know. Just organize your day. Get yourself, figure out what you want to do, write it down, execute on that.
I was interviewing another individual, and I thought it was very interesting. They said, you need to learn how to lead yourself first before you can lead anybody else. And I thought, man, that was a good point. Well, that comes to the end of our interview, so I want to thank you. And it's been great. This will go up on our YouTube, and you will also get a copy of it. So I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Marge. Great to be here.
Great.